Well, welcome back. So I'm working on building a circuit board for the TR6 for all the accessories I've installed, like the fuel injection and the electric fan and the radio I'm going to install later and whatever else I decide to put in this car. So what I've done so far is I bought this piece of 1/4 inch plastic, whoops, that I'm going to put all my parts on. So this is a fuse block from Blue Sea Systems. And here's the box for it. The part number's 5032. So what's unique about this is this up here is dedicated ground. So what you do is run a cable from this post over to your battery ground, and you can hook up all your grounds right here rather than trying to find somewhere on the chassis. And then this, the A and the B, you can see A and B. These are two different, I guess, fuse blocks, which are separate from each other. So this can be full-time power, like battery power, and if you use a relay, this can be switched power, which makes hooking up your accessories real easy because all you have to do is get a big relay like this. This is probably way overkill, but it's a 120 amp relay. So what I'm going to do is go direct from the battery terminal block to this. Part of this will branch off to the full-time power, and then the switch part of this on terminal 87 will go to over here, and this will be my switched power. So once the relay turns on, it'll control this part, and then that battery cable, which will just piggyback off of terminal 30, will still always be hot, and it'll power this. Or I could also just run another cable straight from the battery to here, but either way works. I also bought an 80 amp circuit breaker. Rather than using a big inline fuse with whatever trips, you can just reset it and be on your way rather than dealing with carrying extra fuses in the car. And I also bought a fuel pump relay kit from Summit. This is from Painless Wiring. I'm going to use this in the engine bay and get rid of that one that I put in there. I think this will clean it up, and that's also a weatherproof one. So let's go to the car and see what that'll look like. Okay, so the idea is to clean all of this up. So this is the main wiring harness that goes into the micro squirt. All this will get cleaned up. There was a battery junction block right there this wire directly from the battery hooked in there, and then it goes to the starter right there. Those are your two brown wires that come off the wiring harness, and then this is also from the fuel injection that needs battery power. So I bought this thing. It's just a battery terminal. I also got this from Blue Sea Systems. I'm gonna actually put that down there and make all my connections down there rather than right here. And I'm probably gonna put that circuit breaker right there. And then I'll run my power up to here, which is where that panel is gonna go. And I'll have everything set right in here. I did consider putting it inside the car, but you'd have to drill some pretty decent sized holes because I bought 4-gauge power wire to run all this stuff that's going to come off the battery. And I didn't want to make holes that big into the bulkhead. So, but that's an option, and that'd probably be a cleaner way to do it and probably a little bit easier, but I just didn't want to deal with the holes. So I'm going to set everything up here. And then if you ever need to change anything, it's also easy to get to rather than bending over on your back inside the car trying to figure out fuses or relays and blah, blah, blah. And then as far as the relays go, so for the relays, that's the fan relay right there. I'm going to put the fuel pump relay next to it. I'm probably going to take another piece of plastic and just build a little board. Then I'll connect those relays to, and then run the wiring over here. That'll connect to that fuse block, and everything will be connected right here. The way I have it connected now is I have my switched power on the stock terminal block, which is some of these wires right here. And I just don't like that. It's too much on the stock system, and I'm afraid eventually it's going to fail. So that's why I'm doing this. It'll be a completely separate system, running off, just taking power off the battery, and it'll be totally separate from the stock harness. So hopefully it'll alleviate some issues. So let's get going on it. Okay, so here's what I've done so far. I've got everything mounted up, and I got all the main power wires run. So over here, this will connect to the battery. This comes up, supplies power through the circuit breaker to this post, which goes out. So this wire goes directly over to this A positive terminal, which will be constant power. This wire coming off the circuit breaker travels to the relay. This is terminal number 30 on the relay. And this is your 87. Those two posts down there are your ground and your switched wire that will turn the relay on. So this wire supplies power to the B positive terminal, and this all here will be switched power. And then for this, I just need to build a negative cable that'll go to this post, and then the rest of that will run over to the battery negative, and then all these terminals here will be negative or ground. So next step is to get the standoffs hooked up to this, mount this in the car, get the negative done, and then hook the relays up to this, and that's really pretty much it. So it's just kind of redoing a lot of the wiring. So I'll get some of that done and we'll get the next part going. Okay, so setting this up was kind of weird, but I decided to use some riv nuts through this top part here so I could screw this thing down. Then that avoids having to put nuts on the bottom side, and it kind of almost requires two people to do it. So that should work out pretty good. So now we'll get this thing bolted down and should be good to go, and we'll start on the wiring. There's the other riv nut, and one more, and one more. Okay, everything's all wired up, and I started the car and everything's working and nothing caught on fire, so that's good. So kind of here's what everything looks like. So block A here, this is block A, that's block B. The red wire here is the positive, basically the battery connection for the fuel pump relay. Yellow is the fan. The yellow one here is the switched power for the relay for the fuel pump, and then the orange there is switched power for the fan. And this here is the switch power for this relay and bank here, which controls the micro squirt. And then this one goes to the air fuel rate, or the oxygen sensor for the exhaust, which I have mounted up here on the wall. I'll show you in a second. As far as the power for the relay for this, I just have it hooked in to the fuse block over here. So it's one of those red wires that controls that relay. Main power comes in from this distribution block over here, goes to the circuit breaker. From the circuit breaker, one of these wires goes to terminal A, which is battery power. The other one goes to the relay here, which then supplies power over to terminal B, which is a switch power. And let me show you how I did the relays here. So I just set them up here on the firewall, or excuse me, on the side of the car. It was pretty simple. So I bought the new relay I showed you from Painless, and that's the one that came with the fan and an extra oxygen sensor that goes into the exhaust. So really I probably have about 10 hours of work into this, just running all the wires and figuring out how I want to do it. The hardest part is figuring out how you want to run the wires, by far. Wiring it up is pretty easy, but it's just routing it so you don't have a bunch of stuff all over the place and it looks like a mess. It still kind of looks like a mess, but it's better than it was, and I have everything in one place, so if I blow a fuse or something, I know where it's at, or I know it's easy to get to the connections and all that. So that'll about wrap it up. It wasn't overly expensive to build this. I want to say, with all the parts, probably around 120 bucks. So, but it's just nice to have everything in one place, and like I said, we're not trying to draw power off the stock fuse block, and we're leaving that alone. So basically this system is all separate. It runs directly off the battery down there, and everything comes into here, and the stock wiring harness is basically left alone. So hopefully that'll work well, and maybe that helps someone down the road. Got any questions, let me know. See you on the next one. Thanks.